Ever get hit with like a crazy D&D character idea?
Oh, yeah. All the time.
You know, when you're thinking about a new campaign or whatever, and you're like, what if I just mash these two classes together?
You mean like a barbarian wizard?
Exactly. Like something totally bizarre, but maybe it could actually work.
It's like that perfect mix of game mechanics and just going wild with creativity.
Totally.
Reminds me of this thing that happened in our last session.
Okay.
My half-orc barbarian, he's usually all about solving problems with his great axe, right?
Right.
Well, we came across this locked iron chest.
Oh,
The whole party was stumped, but for some reason I had given him one level of rogue in his backstory.
just one level.
Yeah, just for flavor, And guess what? That 1 point in Thieves' Tool's proficiency was all we needed.
Seriously.
Yeah, it got us some crucial information and a ton of treasure.
I love that. Like a totally unexpected payoff from a tiny detail you added way back when.
Exactly.
And those are the moments that make D&D so great.
Yeah, right.
And that's what we're going to dig into today. The creative possibilities of D&D multiclassing.
Sounds good.
We've been checking out this article on LitRPG Reads by Amir Barakat.
Oh, yeah, I saw that one.
It's got us thinking about all the cool ways you can blend different classes together.
Yeah, for those who might not be familiar, multiclassing is basically taking levels in more than one class.
Right, you're not locked into one path.
Yeah.
You can kind of sample from all these different options.
The article actually calls it an all-you-can-eat buffet of character abilities.
I love that.
It's a great analogy, right?
It is. And there's so many reasons to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Sometimes it's strategic,
Yeah.
Like your party needs a healer or someone who can disarm traps.
Right. Or maybe you just have a very specific character concept in mind.
Exactly. Something you just can't do with a single class.
Like a bard who can also fight like a barbarian.
Yeah. Or a cleric who's amazing at diplomacy.
I think the article mentioned those.
It did.
Yeah.
And that's what's so cool about creative multiclassing. It's about thinking outside the box and finding those weird synergies between classes.
Totally. And it can be a little intimidating at first.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
There are so many options and all these different class features to keep track of.
So many.
But once you start digging in, the potential is huge.
Absolutely.
And it's not always about the most obvious combinations either.
Right. The article talks about how sometimes the most rewarding multi-classes come from those unexpected pairings.
Like what?
Well, for example, a sorcerer could take a couple of levels in Warlock,
Interesting.
and that gives them access to invocations.
Oh, yeah, those are pretty cool.
Right. They're like these passive abilities that give you constant benefits.
Like seeing in magical darkness or casting certain spells without using a spell slot.
Exactly. And for sorcerers who are limited by spell slots, that could be a big deal.
Makes sense.
Or think about a rogue who dips into fighter.
Oh, okay.
They get all these combat proficiencies and maybe even action surge.
So they can make an extra attack?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which is huge for a class that usually just focuses on one big hit.
I see your point.
But it can feel a bit overwhelming at first.
Yeah, trying to manage all those different features and abilities.
The article compares it to solving a Rubik's Cube while wearing oven mitts.
That's pretty accurate.
Right? You've got spell slots from one class progressing differently from another, and proficiencies all over the place.
And each class has its own unique resources to keep track of.
Like Kai points for monks.
Exactly. It's a lot to juggle.
It is.
Mm-hmm.
But the article argues that that kind of strategic chaos is part of the fun.
I can see
It
that.
forces you to get creative with how you use those different elements.
And when you find those combos that work, it's super rewarding.
For sure.
Yeah.
But there are some ground rules you got to keep in mind.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
First, you need to meet the ability score requirements for each class you want to dip into.
Right. Like, if you want to be a paladin, you usually need at least 13 strength and 13 charisma.
Makes sense. You got to have some natural aptitude for the class, right?
Yeah. The article compares it to assembling IKEA furniture, but the instructions are in Draconic and you're missing half the pieces.
Hilarious and so true.
And you also have to think about how the class features, and especially the spell casting rules, interact.
You don't want to end up with a character that feels all cobbled together.
The article calls it a Frankenstein's monster of gameplay.
Perfect description.
The goal is to find those combinations where the features from one class actually enhance the features from the other.
And that's where cherry picking comes in.
Right. You don't have to master every class you dip into.
Just grab those key features that will really make your character concept shine.
And don't be afraid to experiment.
That's so important.
You might have an awesome multi-class idea that doesn't quite work out the way you planned.
It happens.
But even those failures can lead to some cool stories and character quirks.
Totally. So let's dive into some of the more popular multi-class combinations that the article mentions.
Let's do it.
These are the pairings that tend to work really well, both mechanically and thematically.
Hmm.
First up, we have the Sorcerer-Warlock combo.
A classic for a reason.
Right. Sorcerers have that raw, innate magic, and warlocks get their power from a pact with some otherworldly entity.
So you've got this internal magical wellspring combined with a more focused source of arcane power.
Exactly. And then you've got all those flavorful invocations from the Warlock class.
Ah,
Next, we have the Fighter Rogue.
sneaky and brawny.
I love it. You get the fighter's combat skills and maybe even multiple attacks, plus the rogue's stealth and sneak attack.
A versatile character who can handle pretty much any situation.
Then we have the Bard Paladin.
Sing and smite.
What's not to love? You get the Bard's support spells and social skills combined with the Paladin's divine power and martial prowess.
They can inspire allies, heal the wounded, and deliver some righteous justice.
It's a great combo.
Then there's the wizard cleric.
A fascinating mix of arcane intellect and divine faith.
Right, you could have a scholar who's dedicated to a deity or a priest who studies magic.
That's cool. And they'd have access to a huge range of spells, both offensive and supportive.
Drawing from both the weave and divine sources.
Very powerful.
And of course, we can't forget the ranger druid.
Both classes have that deep connection to nature.
So you end up with a character who's a master of the wilds.
They can track prey, fight with nature's power, and even shapeshift.
Pretty awesome.
We also see the rogue bard mentioned in the article.
The ultimate charming trickster.
I love it. They can sneak, steal, deceive, and then charm their way out of any trouble.
Masters of intrigue and performance.
Then there's the barbarian monk.
An interesting one for sure.
Right, it's like this blend of rage-fueled combat and disciplined martial arts.
Maybe they find peace through intense physical exertion, or their calmness is shattered by bursts of fury.
That's a really cool concept.
And remember, you can't cast spells while raging, so keep that in mind.
Good point. Next up, we have the paladin warlock.
Thematically rich.
Definitely. You've got that tension between the paladin's oath and the warlock's pact with a potentially evil entity.
Lots of potential for compelling role-playing there.
For sure. And then there's the cleric rogue.
Sneaky healer.
I like it. Maybe they use their skills to infiltrate dangerous cults, or they're a former thief who found redemption.
Lots of possibilities.
We also see the wizard fighter.
The classic battle mage.
Right. They're equally skilled with weapons and spells.
A potent mix of martial prowess and arcane power.
Then there's the druid sorcerer.
Nature's chaos and mystical mayhem.
Their spells would be wild and unpredictable, reflecting the forces of nature within them.
That's a great image.
And of course, we have the rogue ranger.
The ultimate stealthy outdoorsman.
Right. They can track prey, navigate the wilderness, and slip through the shadows unseen.
A deadly combination.
The bard warlock is another interesting one.
A performer whose talents come with a price, perhaps?
Maybe their magic influences their art in unexpected ways.
Very cool.
And finally, we have the barbarian cleric.
Rage against evil with divine backing.
It's a powerful image. A zealous warrior channeling their fury in the service of their god.
It's a great list of popular combinations, but it's important to remember that they still require careful planning.
Right, you got to make sure your ability scores and class features work together.
Otherwise, you might end up with a character that's not as effective as you hoped.
So now let's get to the really fun stuff.
You mean the off-the-wall, multi-class ideas?
Exactly. This is where you can let your imagination run wild.
The article describes it as mixing ice cream flavors that no one thought would work until they do.
The great analogy.
So what are some of these crazy combinations?
So the article specifically mentions the wizard barbarian.
Huh.
I know it sounds weird, right?
It does.
But imagine a scholar who just hulks out when they get frustrated.
Their spells becoming wild and unpredictable.
It's such a fun image.
It is.
And then there's the monk druid.
Inner peace meets outer nature.
I love it. They've achieved this serene focus through martial discipline, but they can also shapeshift and command the forces of nature.
That's really cool.
And then the article has this whole table of other peculiar combinations.
Like what?
Well, there's the fighter wizard.
A mighty mage killer.
The article says they think a sword is just a pointy wand.
That's hilarious.
Right, maybe they're a heavily armored warrior with a few magic tricks up their sleeve.
Or they approach magic with the same brute force as they do combat.
Exactly. And then there's the sorcerer ranger.
Elemental spells and stealth.
The article says they have a penchant for camping.
That's funny.
I can see them trying to be stealthy in the wilderness, but their wild magic keeps causing little mishaps.
Maybe a sudden burst of light or a gust of wind.
Exactly. Then there's the druid paladin.
Nature's guardian with a divine edge.
It's like a paladin who worships Mother Nature. They
Interesting.
get their divine power from the natural world instead of a specific deity.
I like that.
And who could forget the rogue cleric?
Sneaky healer.
They're all about clerical duties with a penchant for pilfering.
Maybe they borrow offerings from the temple to fund their other activities.
That's hilarious.
It is.
Then there's the barbarian sorcerer.
A berserker with spells.
Imagine them hulking out and their magic going haywire at the same time.
That's a recipe for disaster.
But a really fun disaster.
True.
Then there's the warlock monk.
Eldritch invocations meet serenity.
They meditate on the thrill of dark bargains.
It's a really compelling contrast.
It is. And then there's the bard wizard.
Charms and spellbooks combined.
I could just picture them singing about spell components dramatically.
Their performances would be epic.
Totally. And finally, we have the ranger warlock.
A hunter with eldritch powers.
They treat demons like particularly wild game.
That's a great way to put it.
All these off-the-wall combinations show how you can blend almost any two classes into a cool character concept.
You just need a little imagination.
And once you've settled on your multi-class, you got to think about how those class features will work together.
Right. It's not just about having a bunch of different abilities. It's about finding those synergies that make your character really shine.
The article gives some great examples of this.
Like what?
Well, one example is combining the rogue sneak attack with the fighter's action surge.
So they can get 2 sneak attacks in one turn.
Exactly. Or how about the paladin's divine smite with the rogue sneak attack?
A massive burst of damage.
And then there's the warlock's eldritch blast with the sorcerer's metamagic.
You could twin the spell or increase its range.
Lots of possibilities,
We also see the barbarian's rage combined with the monk's unarmored defense.
making them super durable even without armor.
That's clever.
And for mobile characters, there's the rogue's cunning action with the mobile feat.
They'd be incredibly hard to hit.
And the article even mentions the synergy between the druid's wild shape and the monk's martial arts.
So they could still fight effectively in animal form,
Exactly. And of course, there's the classic combo of spell casting and martial weapons.
like a fighter wizard.
They can switch between spells and swordplay as needed.
Very versatile,
For survivability, you could combine the paladin's lay on hands with the fighter's second wind.
giving them multiple ways to heal themselves.
And for spellcasters, there's the wizard's arcane recovery with the sorcerer's font of magic.
Helping them manage their spell slots and sorcery points.
Defensively, you could use the monk's deflect missiles with the wizard's shield spell.
A powerful combination.
And for battlefield control, there's the polearm master feat with his sentinel feat.
They could lock down entire areas.
Finding these synergies is what makes multiclassing so rewarding.
It's about creating a character that's both unique and effective.
Now let's talk about role-playing a multiclass character.
That adds a whole other layer of depth.
It does. When your characters walk different paths and learn different skills, you need a backstory that explains how it all came together.
Like, why did a cleric suddenly become a rogue?
Or what made a monk embrace the fury of a barbarian,
The article gives some examples of these challenges and how to solve them.
like mixing divine and arcane.
Maybe they're an outcast god, fascinated by mortal magic.
Or they accidentally prayed to the wrong deity. And there's balancing stealth and virtue.
Like a thief turned saint who maybe borrowed a few holy relics along the way.
And there's reconciling rage and wisdom.
A sage who fights with words and fists and meditates by yelling.
These are such great examples.
They show how those seemingly contradictory multi-classes can actually lead to some really interesting character backstories.
And that brings us to our final point, how multiclassing can really shape a character's identity.
It's not just about gaining new abilities, it's about reflecting a change in their worldview or their goals.
The article lists a bunch of character motivations that can be explored through multiclassing.
Like seeking balance.
Maybe a rogue multiclasses into fighter because they're looking for a more honorable path.
Or divine purpose.
A cleric who discovers they have innate magic might become a sorcerer.
There's also the redemption arc.
A warrior seeking to atone for their past might become a paladin.
And nature's call.
A city-dwelling ranger might embrace the ways of the druid.
And soul searching.
A monk might make a pact with an otherworldly entity.
And mystical curiosity.
A wizard might be drawn to the primal magic of the barbarian.
And cultural fusion.
A bard might blend their traditions with wizardry.
And rebel with a cause.
A paladin might become a rogue to fight for what they believe in.
And power seeker.
A sorcerer might study wizardry to become even more powerful.
All these examples show how multiclassing can be a really powerful storytelling tool.
It's about reflecting a character's inner journey
Yeah.
and the events that have shaped them.
So to wrap things up,
Creative multiclassing is so much more than just mechanics.
it's about building unique and compelling characters with rich backstories and exciting gameplay.
It can be a little complex, but the rewards are huge.
It's all about embracing that what-if moment and seeing where your imagination takes you.
We want to give a big thank you to LitRPG Reads and the author of the article that inspired this discussion, Amir Barakat, also known as Bardic Lore.
And Paul Bello as well.
Their insights into D&D and character building are awesome.
They really captured the joy and potential of creating something truly special.
Now, we want to hear from you guys.
Yeah.
What are some of the craziest or most effective multi-class combinations you've ever played or seen?
Tell us all about it in the comments below.
We'd love to hear your thoughts on multi-classing,
Thanks for listening.
and we'll see you next time.